Welcome to From the Frontlines, Turkey. Today I'm going to be joined by Sarah. Sarah is the Chief Development Officer of the media ministry in Turkey that Guidelines has been working with for 9 years. However, we won't be naming the ministry due to security concerns. But our partner has been reaching 7 million Turks with the love of Jesus through their 6 different FM signals across the country of Turkey. They've also been working in new media in one of the most spiritually darkest places in the world. At the conclusion of our presentation, we're going to have some time for questions. So if you're joining us live, you can go ahead and drop those questions into the chat box. And for our live studio audience, don't worry, we'll be walking around with the microphone a little bit later. So today, we're going to Turkey. But before we begin, let's take a look at just where we're going.
Türkiye stands at the crossroads of East and West, a nation of 88 million people bridging Europe and Asia. Once the cradle of Christianity, this land was home to vibrant Christian communities established by the apostles Paul and John. The 7 churches of Revelation were here. Cities like Ephesus and Antioch became central to the spread of the early church. But history took a dramatic turn, and by the end of the 1960s, the Christian presence had fallen from 30% to under 1%. Today's Türkiye presents a paradox. On the surface, it is a secular democracy with Western appearances and constitutional religious freedom.
Ailem Hristiyan olduğumu bilmiyor. Öğrenirlerse her şeyimi kaybederim.
Yet beneath this secularist facade lies the deeply held belief that to be Turkish is to be Muslim. Anyone who converts is often viewed as a traitor.
When I became a Christian, my uncle said, "Impossible. We are a Muslim family."
There are an estimated 10,000 Protestant Christians in Turkey. For them, following Jesus often means secrecy, isolation, and risk. For the children of these believers, the challenges are even greater. Excused from Islamic religious classes at school, they are immediately marked as different.
My children suffer because of our faith. They have no Christian friends in their age. They feel alone in a culture that doesn't understand them.
With no clear legal standing for churches, most believers meet in homes or rented facilities. Gaining permission for official church buildings is nearly impossible. In this environment, audiovisual and social media have become a lifeline for both curious seekers and isolated believers. These means offer what face-to-face evangelism often cannot: a safe, private space to discover the message about Jesus. In this spiritually challenging landscape, sharing faith remains an act of remarkable courage.
Sarah, thank you for being with us today. You came all the way from Turkey.
Yes, thank you.
All right, well, let's get going with some questions. So we just heard that Turkey was actually the cradle of Christianity. People were first called Christians in Turkey, but now it's 99% Muslim.
Yeah.
What happened?
That's too long to go into today, but the short of it is basically when the Ottoman Empire moved in, they lowered Christians down. They were a Muslim society, and Christians got lowered down to second class. And then throughout history moving forward, there were people exchanges, other events that happened that erased Christians from the population, and it's now less than 1%.
And you were saying even in the last 100 years, what has happened in Turkey?
Yeah, this was just in 100 years. 100 years ago, it was 30%, and now it's less than 1%.
Wow, that's amazing. So in the video we just watched, one of the men said, to be a Turk is to be Muslim. Can you explain that a little more for us?
I would say over history, this country is just set up for Muslims. There's not a space for the Christian faith. There is freedom of religion on the Constitution currently. That could change, I suppose. But there's no way to have a legalized church. There's no way to have schools, Christian education, whether that be for adults or for children. Often Christians are not accepted into governmental jobs. And so it just shows that it's just set up for a Muslim. in this country.
And so how does that affect families? How does that affect children?
It makes it really difficult for the families because a lot of Christians are first-generation Christians.
Okay, what does that mean?
That means nobody else in their family is a Christian. They are the first ones, and so they're trailblazing. You know, what does it mean to be a Christian mom? What does it mean to be a Christian dad? How do I raise Christian children? The society is not set up to be able to have that Christian influence in your own life as well as in the lives of your children.
And so do most Turkish believers hide their faith in Jesus?
Yeah, I would say a majority of them do. And that is because of the consequences that come from it. It's especially true for women. Women are very likely to hide their faith from their family because if they tell them that they are a believer, their family will force them to come back home or put them in isolation until they're willing to turn back to the Islamic faith. And Christians just don't want to do that. Actually, I remember we had a person on staff who their family forced them to go to Islamic classes to the point where he was depressed and he tried to commit suicide. It didn't succeed, and he ran away. He was from the east. He ran away to Ankara. When he was in Ankara, he met a Christian and he came to faith. And over time, he finally said, you know what, I'm going to tell my family. So he called up his family. You know what his mother said?
What?
It would have been better if you had died.
Wow.
It's really hard to be a Christian in Turkey because there are often threats. Our CEO, and he talks often about different threats that he has received himself, and the ones that are worse for him are the ones that come against his family, saying, we're going to stab them, we're going to cut their throats. And unfortunately, these are things that Christians have to deal with on a regular basis.
I remember when I was visiting you and the CEO of your ministry in Ankara, and I learned about what life was like for his children, children of Christians in school. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, it's, again, there are no other Christians, or there are very few. Actually, I don't think this came out, 85 million people in the country, only 10,000 known Turkish believers.
Amazing.
And so you imagine your child is in school, at least 300 children are there, they are the only ones. Their parents don't want them in the Islamic classes, so they are allowed to exclude them from the class. But in excluding them, they mark their child as different. And so everyone comes against them. Sometimes even teachers will rise up against them and say, why don't you believe in this faith? What's wrong with you? Come back to Islam. And so it's a very high-pressure position for the children. Again, there aren't a lot of children in the church because we're dealing with a small population. And so they don't have a lot of friends, not a lot of places to get that influence in their Christian lives. And there is a couple of camps that take place in the summertime, and the kids really enjoy to go to that, if they can go to it. Unfortunately, not every child is allowed to go or able to go.
So that might be the only time they would be with other kids that also
that are their own age and that believe.
Jesus.
Yeah.
So how does someone hear about Jesus? Let's talk about radio. How does radio help Turks understand the message of Jesus, come to faith in Jesus?
Yeah, radio is a very strong medium in the country, and the fact that you can broadcast the love of Jesus 24 hours a day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it really makes a difference in the lives of people. And I don't know how it is in America. Sometimes I get the idea that, radio is old, let's get rid of it, let's just use social media. But in Turkey, still 42% of the population is listening to radio daily. It's the trusted source of information.
It's interesting.
Yeah, it's like your friends. So internet is misleading, but radio, people are still listening to. And radio is like rain on hard ground. It's pouring down constantly, and so it's softening up that ground and allowing the Word of God to go into the hearts of people.
I know that I've had many conversations, of course, we've had conversations together about how does a Muslim come to faith in Jesus, and they are they may have heard the name Jesus, right? Because that's part of Islam, Jesus as not the Son of God, but they've been told, they've been misinformed.
That's right.
About Jesus and about Christianity.
That's right.
And so initially there's very, very hard resistance toward that, right?
It's both what they're told, these lies that they learn from these religious classes that they're in from a very young age, as well as history. The history of the country has also turned a lot of people against the Christian message. And so it's often takes the common story of a Muslim coming to faith is they hear about Jesus, they turn stunningly back to their faith. They'll dig deeper into Islam than they ever did in their entire life. They'll be disillusioned by what they see. Then they'll turn to atheism, and they'll say, well, if there's nothing there, there must not be a God. And so become atheists. And then slowly, they have to hear the message again and again and again. We often say it takes at least 100 times hearing the message of Christ before they come to faith.
And I know we're going to talk about guidelines programs in a few minutes, but I remember one time you said that they will listen to you'll play the same program over and over during the week, and people will listen over and over because they're trying to comprehend this God of love that's reached down to them rather than them having reached up to him to try to please him. I'll never forget when I was visiting our partner in Ankara, and we left the radio station, we got into a taxi, and one of the station ministry leaders was in the taxi with me, and she said, the taxi driver is listening to the Christian radio station, which normally they would hide it, right? I mean, maybe they had it on because we were Westerners and we just came from the radio station. And she was speaking with him, conversing with him in Turkish, and she said, he is coming to faith in Jesus. That he was on that process and taking that journey.
And it was really interesting, too, because she said, he recognizes my voice, which showed he really was listening to that station in order to know that her voice was even there.
Yeah, it wasn't a one-time thing.
No.
So people will they be listening in secret?
Oftentimes, yes. Which is, I mean, radio is really important. That's why apps are really important as well, making sure you have access to it on your telephones. And so, radio is very important. I will say also that social media has to play hand in hand with radio, because it's impossible to know how many people are listening to radio. The only way we have any hint is I bump into you, I tell you what I'm doing. Oh, I know that radio. Otherwise, you don't hear. People aren't calling up the radio. They're not emailing the radio, so you don't know.
And why aren't they doing that?
Shame, for one. It might be tracked down, or
might be unsafe.
Even, I don't know how it is here. Maybe here you don't contact the radio very often either. So radio is just a hard thing to track in terms of number. But social media is our way to touch individual people, and so they will write and they will.
So they'll message you, they'll text you. Tell us a little bit about the messages you receive.
Yeah, let's just say we're making an impact, but maybe not the one we wish we were making, because it's often cursing, often attacking. You know, we're going to find you, we're going to kick you out. How are you doing this in our country? Or what foreign entity are you tied to that you would do this? And that really gives our Turkish brothers and sisters a chance to say, no, I'm a Turk. I love my country, but I love Jesus. Let me share with you what he's done in my life. And those critical comments, they start out strong, but if you wisely answer them and are patient, they can, not always, but they can turn into those deeper
Yes,
conversations.
I've read transcripts of some of those conversations where the person conversing with them just answers gently, and you can see the turning through the multiple conversations, and they may write back again and again, right?
Yes, they could, yeah.
The ministry.
Yeah.
Incredible. All right, well, I have referred to you as our partner, and you may have heard us talk about our partners around the world. What does that really mean? Let's explain how we work together. So you have radio stations, you're reaching the Turkish people in the Turkish language, in Kurmanji Kurdish, in Syriac, and in Arabic, right?
That's
So
right.
4 different languages. So Guidelines hands over our English scripts to
That's
you,
right.
and then what happens?
Then we have to translate them, or better yet, we have to transpose them,
And what does that mean?
which means you have to make it applicable to the culture. So not changing the message of the script, but changing the things that go in. But actually, Guidelines has very little transposing that needs to take place because you guys are really good at just the biblical teaching and not a lot of American examples. So,
The joke I tell about that,
no.
that I tell my dad, Dad, I think the greatest compliment you ever received was when someone said, Dr. Sala, you don't sound like an American.
Yeah,
Because the gospel is not American. The gospel is for all.
that's right.
So
yeah.
thank you for that. So you translate them thought for thought, you make them sound, use words that are going to sound natural to
That's
the
right.
listener, and then what?
And then they're recorded in the different languages. And so you already mentioned those Kurdish and Turkish and Syriac and well, you give us the Arabic ones. And then we broadcast them on our radio stations. And now, as I said, social media needs to be used. And so we love the fact that Guidelines is so short because it means your 2-minute reset program can now be turned into a short reels that can be put onto social media.
What's a reel, Sarah, in case we have any older listeners and viewers?
A reels is it's a post for social media that uses often video and voice. And so you have the subtitles going across it. So it's much more interactive and people are much quicker to respond to it and to reach out. So it's a great way to be able to hear what people are thinking about your programs.
And so that's really how our partnership works. And then you share the programs with us, and we keep them on our computers, and then we share them with any other ministries, anybody else anywhere in the world that can use those. And then you share stories with us.
Yeah.
Is there, and this is, I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this, but is there a listener story that really stands out to you? Someone whose life was really impacted by your ministry of radio.
Oh, there are a lot of them.
I know you hear a lot from people in prison. I've read those stories. Yeah.
Actually, that's prison is one of those areas that people are listening to. That's the only thing that they have
Captive
to
audience.
listen. Yeah, and radio. That's where radio is really important because you don't have access to internet or so the radio frequency is really important. Oh goodness!
I know I'm putting you on the spot.
You are putting me on the spot.
I do think, though, that Turkey is probably one of the harder places that, of our partners that we work with, that just that ground is really hard.
It's amazing because a lot of the Muslim countries around seem to be more open spiritually to the gospel. And I think the Lord really needs to do a work to break through that spiritual wall that's there because a major hurt happened in Turkey, and so they are really resistant to the gospel.
And you were sharing earlier as we were visiting that of the cities where Paul taught and preached, that those are some of the areas that are most resistant to the gospel.
Where Paul was stoned
Yes.
and almost killed is still one of the strongest strongholds in the country of Turkey. They have tried for years to plant a church in that city, and it is really difficult.
Which is why we say at Guidelines, prayer is the work. Prayer is always above and beyond all. Also going off topic from our previously planned questions, there was a horrible earthquake in Turkey.
Yeah.
Is it 4 years ago now?
23, February 6th,
Okay, it's only been 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And the ministry had just gone on air in Antakya, which
That's
we
right.
know as the city of Antioch in the Bible. And tell us how God protected and did a
Yeah.
miracle there.
So January 12th, 2023, that station went live. And then February 6th, 2023, the earthquake struck. That city in Antioch was one of the most hardest hit cities, and at least 3/4 or maybe even 5/6 of the city was destroyed. Immediately, our CEO was in a car driving down to the city to see how it is. How are the people? Not see how it is. He was more concerned about the people. And praise God, the building was damaged that had our equipment in it, but none of the equipment was damaged.
It was a miracle.
It was a miracle. And so we were able to take all that out. We moved all the equipment up to the antenna, which is up on the mountain. It took a couple weeks just because of the internet infrastructure, but after 2 weeks, the radio was up and running and strong, and it was a major boost for the church. There's a couple of churches in the area that kept going, and it was a really big help for them.
A voice of peace.
A voice of peace. Actually, a voice of life, I think, is what we called it.
Is that what? Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually called Emmanuel. Well, if we can ever get permission. The government. We have problems getting permissions for different things with the radio.
Oh,
but
so they
anyways.
won't let you call it that.
Yeah, right now it's called youth radio. That's
Okay.
the old name.
Okay.
But eventually we would like it to be called Emmanuel.
And currently, we're going to talk a little bit about what is happening in Turkey right now, but the government would like it, those in power now, if Turkey was an Islamic state.
Very much so.
Yeah. Is that right? And so I think that's why it was pretty amazing in 2018 when the government gave you a license for a radio station in the city of Mardin. And Guidelines was able to come alongside
Yes.
you and help with that. Tell
Yeah.
us why that station was special and what's happening with that radio station today.
Yeah, so Mardin is a unique city. First, the Assyrians are there. These are Christians who have been in the country for 2,000 years.
Wow.
And they have their main church in that city. But you also have the Kurds in that city, Arabic speakers in the city, and Turkish speakers. And these are all national Turks. I don't know how to phrase that differently.
It's a crossroads
Yeah,
of cultures.
Yeah, but they're all originally from Turkey. And the problem is so much was done to peg these cultures against each other, and even evil atrocities were carried out among these groups to each other. And so there's a lot of dissension. Help me with that word.
got
My
it.
English is not good. There's a lot of dissension among these groups. And so for a Christian radio station to go in there and to be able to broadcast in each of these languages the love of Jesus is a huge testimony of Jesus loves each of you and he can bring you together. I should also say, never in the history of Turkey has there been a station like this where these 4 languages are broadcast in the same broadcast.
Amazing, isn't it?
Never in Turkish history has the gospel gone out over the airwaves in Kurdish. And even though the Assyrians are the oldest Christians, I don't know very much of, I don't think there's any Christian broadcast in the Syriac language. And Guidelines is the only one currently that is broadcasting in Syriac.
Amazing. Well, it's our privilege. And I remember you telling that when that radio station first went on the air, you began just by playing Christian music
Yeah.
initially in English. And you shared how the shopkeepers of the city would play that station, and they said, because they said the sound of peace is in the air. That's
Yes.
incredible.
Yeah. It's amazing when Christians, I think that's the difference, you know. A lot of secular music is played in Turkey, but it doesn't have the Spirit's work in it. When the Spirit's work is in it, even if you don't understand the language, you can sense His working, and God can use it to draw people. And He did. Many people, it started, and they started going to the church there and saying, "Do you have a radio station here?" And they're like, "Yes." And that church actually has at least 50,000 people come through it, because Mardin is a historical landmark, and Turks from all over the country will go to that city just to see the history. And so that pastor diligently shares the gospel with each person that comes through there. And he said, "I wish I could keep 1% of the people that give their lives to Christ in my city."
Wow.
But they come to faith and they go back to their cities that they're coming from. So God is doing an amazing work in Mardin, and Guidelines had a big part to play in that.
Well, it's our privilege. It's all of you viewers, you are having a part in that ministry. We are doing it all together.
Yeah.
We're better together. Well, this is a tumultuous time in Turkey right now. The government things you've shared with me before, how it kind of goes in waves, the persecution, and this is really a time of intense opposition, intense persecution. The government, as we mentioned, would like if Turkey was just an Islamic state and there would be no Christian broadcasting of any kind. It's also a time of a crazy inflation. Tell us a little bit about what's happening.
Yeah. With the inflation, we were talking earlier, I went to a friend's wedding, and they paid for the venue last year, and they paid, sorry, it's Turkish lira, but they paid 80,000 Turkish lira for that venue. And now, if they were to pay for the same venue, it's 600,000 Turkish lira.
From 80,000 to 600,000.
And this is happening across the board. Yeah, it's hard to keep up with the inflation. The dollar does not have the strength that it used to have. We have many partners like you guys, so a good portion of the funding that comes in for the ministry is in dollars. And it used to be great. It helped sustain it, but right now it's not keeping up, and the dollar does not have its strength.
So all of your expenses are just more than doubled.
More than double.
Yeah. So I wanted to share that there is an urgent need for our partner ministry right now, and so we wanted to just make it available today during our program and afterwards. If God is touching your heart and you'd like to help meet that urgent need, we're going to make that possible. You can do that by sending an email to donate@guidelines.org. And we will make sure that your gift goes straight to helping with this really pressing need in light of the conditions in Turkey at this time. All right, well, I think that we probably have some questions, so we're going to open it up for some questions at this point, and maybe we will start with our YouTube Live audience. Do we have any questions from anybody out there in YouTube land?
We do have a few questions. So the first question is, with so few Christians in Turkey, do you see unity within the Turkish church? Why or why not?
Oh, that hurts my heart. I wish I could say yes. In one sense, there is some unity, but in the other sense, despite the youth of the church, there is division because there's denominations, there's some cultural hang-ups that cause some division as well. And so it's a big, big prayer point for Turkey. Actually, anytime I'm writing prayer, I'm asking for unity in the church because the body there really needs to be unified. And I think it's also really important to note, don't just pray for the Turkish-speaking church. there are other nationalities. You have Iranians, you have Afghanis, you have Arabic speakers. So we really need to be praying for the unity, because the government also builds up the stories of the other nationalities, and then Turks just don't have a good view of them. And so that also brings disunity in the church.
I think our viewer has really accurately hit on a point where Satan is at work
Yes.
in Turkey.
Yeah.
Yeah, attacking and
Trying to
dividing.
squash the seed
Yes.
that's there.
If he can get the church fighting, then, yeah, so thank you, viewer, for that
Yeah.
question.
Another question, how can we be praying for the Turkish people, and what are the biggest things to be praying for?
Well, we touched on one of them. I think boldness is another thing that really needs to be prayed for, because we already talked about the difficulties of being a Christian. I think also pray for, I was having a discussion with my partner, the business partner, and he said, it's really hard for me to know how to be a Christian dad. Like, how do I raise a Christian child? Because he doesn't have that influence around him that can give him all those biblical resources. I think that's another great reason why we partner with you, is because we don't have the resources in Turkish, let alone Kurmanji, Syriac. There just isn't this abundance of things that are available. And so, yeah, pray for Christians to be able to know how to raise their families, how to love each other well, and pray that many people come to faith.
We've got my mom here in our live studio audience today, and I think that you and Dad have written a few things about raising Christian families. We might have to send some more scripts your way.
That's right.
We have another question. What are some misconceptions that people in the West often have about ministry in Turkey, and then in Turkey in general?
I think, many people nowadays, they watch Netflix, and it's really easy to find Turkish shows on there. And so from the outside, it can be really easy to look and say, oh, that's really Western looking. So I think it's really important, no matter how Western it looks, to know it really is a Muslim country, and therefore that's how we need to pray for it. In terms of, you hit on a good point of, it's really hard to see growth and see fruit in the country. And I say a worker. I actually am hesitant to say the other word even here. But there's this idea of, if you find the magic key, that church is going to be planted and you're going to be able to move on to the next thing. And so many countries, it's, 1 to 3 years and you have a church and you move on. Turkey is not like that. It takes years and years and tears and sweat and blood. And so that's a big misconception I think that people have. It's, you're still there? Why are you not moving on? Or you're not getting fruit? Well, move on. Go somewhere where you can be fruitful,
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, and I think now we're ready to open it up to the floor here in our Guidelines studio, otherwise known as our home office. Do we have any questions from our audience? I think.
Sarah, earlier you mentioned that Turkey had been deeply hurt historically. Are we referring to a historical event, or are we talking about the Crusades, or what are we talking about here?
Exactly, you hit it. The Crusades. The cross being used against the Muslim. Yeah. And when I first went to Turkey a long time ago, it was a big no-no. You never mention Crusades or anything like that. And there are still many parts in Turkey where that is a very sore subject.
So you're saying there's like a built-in
defense against
resistance
yeah.
and hatred just of
Yes.
anything Christian or
Yes.
related to Christianity.
Yeah. And I would say that's probably the biggest blocker in the country.
First of all, I want to say thanks for all the hard work you're doing there. It's God's obviously work through your hands, so thank you, and be safe. Second of all, you mentioned how important radio was, and 42% of the population. How easy is the access to broadcast, to radio, to even some of the smartphones for the younger generation that are going to be listening? I just was curious, is it easy to get access to that, or is that something they need?
You mean to be able to start a broadcast or to just do broadcast?
To get to a
They can
broadcast
do-
or to actually have a phone, is it difficult to get a phone, or is that everybody has one there?
Are you kidding me? Everyone. Turks are so far advanced in phone technology, it would make you blush. It's actually not difficult. And even one of the things that we do is we have an app that has all of our radio stations on it, so you can listen to it. And praise God, there are many Christian, I want to qualify many, but there are different Christian ministries that also have apps and websites and social media. And so it is pretty easy. Also, I don't have my phone here, I almost reached for it. YouVersion, has the Bible in Turkish, or Kurmanji as well. And so they can look on their phones. Actually, phones are a great way for people to find the truths of the gospel. And so we do, as Bonnie said, we're trying new technology, new media all the time, because wherever the people are, that's where we want the message.
No more questions.
We do have one more.
Okay.
What gives you hope as you continue serving in such a spiritually resistant place?
The fact that God is big, He has a plan, and He's carrying it out. Like, we see it again and again, whether it be in little minute things or whether it be in huge miracles that need to be met. He's faithful. So you're going to make me cry, so I'm not going to go much further.
Well, we want to say that you're not alone, that we are with you. We're with you even when we can't be with you, in spirit and in prayer. And I think that everyone here tonight, all of you listening, if you will really covenant to pray for this ministry, to pray for the country of Turkey, the people of Turkey. This is not too hard for God. This is not too hard. So thank you so much, Sarah, for being with us, helping us understand. And again, if you'd like to help with the current pressing financial need with this ministry in Turkey, you can do that by emailing us at donate@guidelines.org. If you'd like to get some more information about the ministry, I'm sure that Sarah would be happy to share that as well. So you can send an email again to donate@guidelines.org with just if you have some more questions as well. So Sarah, thank you so much. All right, well, I'd like to invite you to join us next fall for our next From the Frontlines. We're going to be joined by our partner from Lebanon, Noor Boutros. We'll be talking about reaching people with the message of Jesus in Lebanon. And that is, I think that's going to be in October, but stay posted because you'll be hearing about it. Thanks again. So for From the Frontlines, I'm Bonnie Sala.